This is the Challenger Two, a British-made battle tank that carries a legendary reputation, being indestructible. Before Ukraine, no Challenger Two had ever been destroyed in combat by enemy fire. Never. 62 tons of British steel, armor that can withstand almost anything. And the most accurate cannon ever mounted on a war tank. Because of this impeccable reputation, in March 2023, the United Kingdom decided to send 14 of these machines to Ukraine. But the truth is that this tank shouldn't be there. It's too heavy for the Ukrainian terrain. It sinks in the mud.
And they just said it's too heavy, it's weak, and it keeps getting stuck. And you can see that's exactly what happened here.
Its ammunition hasn't been manufactured for 20 years, so the stock is scarce. That makes it a logistical nightmare in a war of attrition like this. And they only sent 14 units. 14 against thousands of Russian tanks. The numbers just didn't make sense. But Ukraine discovered something ingenious about this British tank that even the engineers who created it hadn't imagined. A technical detail, a unique feature, which, when combined with modern battlefield technology, turned this nightmare into one of the deadliest weapons at their disposal. Let me show you. The year was 2023. Right at the beginning of the year, in March, it was already possible to see that the war had caused a huge impact in Ukraine. At that time, experts estimated that Ukraine would need about 1,500 tanks to have any real chance against the Russians. The 14 tanks I mentioned earlier represented less than 1% of that number. It was statistically irrelevant. But the United Kingdom wasn't just thinking about military mathematics, they were playing political chess. You see, before those 14 challengers arrived, there was what diplomats called the tank taboo. Western countries were afraid to send modern tanks to Ukraine. Putin had warned that this would be crossing a red line. He threatened escalation, even talked about nuclear weapons, and that paralyzed everyone. So, the United Kingdom made a bold move. They sent the challengers first, broke the taboo, and did it specifically targeting Germany. The reason? There were more than 2,000 German Leopard 2 tanks spread across Europe. Countries wanted to send these tanks to Ukraine, but they couldn't. Re-export laws required German approval. Germany was hesitant, but when the British sent the challengers first, the diplomatic pressure became unbearable. The taboo was broken, and it worked. Germany finally gave in. Other countries followed. In the end, Ukraine received more than 300 modern Western tanks. Leopards, Abrams, and others. Those 14 challengers unleashed an avalanche of military equipment. Politically, that was brilliant. But there was still a huge problem. These tanks arrived in a war that no longer made sense for tanks. It's strange to say that, but let me explain. At the beginning of the conflict, in 2022, tanks worked in the traditional way. They led advances, protected infantry, and, of course, destroyed other tanks, exactly as they were designed to do. Just to give you an idea, Russia used thousands of its tanks in an attempt to take Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. As you probably know, that didn't work. As for Ukraine, well, it used its tanks in the counteroffensive of September 2022 and liberated thousands of square kilometers in the Kharkiv region.
We were attacking a fortified position called Moscow. We destroyed the first line of defense and pulled back because we were out of ammunition. They started to run away. our infantry started to take their trenches.
They didn't expect our tanks. They thought it would just be infantry shooting at them and quickly retreating. But there were 4 tanks shooting at them.
It worked perfectly, but then everything changed. The drones arrived. Small, cheap, lethal. First-person view drones, which cost a few $1,000s, started hunting tanks that cost millions. And they were devastatingly efficient. Russia lost about 2/3 of its tanks to drone attacks. Not missiles, not other tanks, drones. Suddenly, anything that moved on the battlefield was detected within minutes and destroyed soon after. The sky was full of eyes, and those eyes carried explosives. Ukraine tried to use its new Western tanks in the traditional way in 2023. They launched a major offensive in Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia regions. They threw everything they had: Challengers, Abrams, Leopards. The goal was to break through the Russian defensive lines, but those lines were absurd. There were huge anti-tank ditches, concrete obstacles called dragon's teeth, and above all, drones, lots of drones. The Western tanks couldn't get past the first defensive line. The result? The offensive failed. Equipment was lost, including the first Challenger Two confirmed destroyed in combat. That invincibility was over, and one thing became very clear that day. Using tanks on the front line was suicide. Tanks, as a traditional offensive weapon, were obsolete in this war. But then something surprising happened. Instead of giving up on the Challengers, Ukraine decided to look at these problematic tanks in a completely different way. They asked a simple question: if we can't use this tank on the front line, where can we use it? And the answer was found well hidden behind a specific technical feature: the cannon. More specifically, the L-30A1 130mm cannon. And do you want to know what makes it special? All modern North Atlantic Treaty Organization tanks use smoothbore cannons. They are smoothbore barrels that allow their projectiles to reach higher speeds, something essential to penetrate the armor of other tanks. But the Challenger 2 is different. It uses a rifled-type cannon. That is, the inside of its barrel has spiral grooves. The projectile spins as it passes through these grooves. This spin creates aerodynamic stability, like a football spinning in the air. The result? Insane accuracy. We're talking about the most accurate tank ever built. It holds the world record for tank-on-tank destruction at the greatest distance in history. It's literally a sniper rifle, but with 62 tons, and there's more. Because of this rifled cannon, the British use a different type of ammunition, known as high-explosive squash head. It is highly effective against fortifications and light vehicles. The range is impressive. It can reach up to 8 kilometers. In contrast, standard ammunition for other tanks only reaches about 3 kilometers. This feature makes all the difference. And Ukraine noticed that, because if the Challenger can't go to the front line, it doesn't need to. It can stay far away and still hit the target with precise accuracy. So a completely new tactic was born. The Challengers no longer lead infantry advances. They stay hidden 3 to 5 kilometers behind the lines, protected by trees, and they function as mobile precision artillery. But then there's another problem. How does it know where to shoot if it's so far away? And this is where the modern technology I mentioned at the beginning comes in. Drones. The same drones that made tanks obsolete on the front line. Now they work together with the Challengers. Ukrainian surveillance drones fly over Russian positions, identify targets, bunkers, fortified positions, and send precise global positioning system coordinates to the Challengers. The tanks adjust their aim and fire. The drone observes where the shell lands. If it misses, it sends a correction. the Challenger adjusts and fires again. It hits. Meanwhile, larger attack drones bomb the same positions. It's a coordinated attack. When those positions are destroyed or weakened enough, then the infantry advances. All of this is done in relative safety to occupy the ground. The Ukrainian tank commander, with the codename Hera, described it well. It's really like a sniper rifle. It allows you to hit enemy targets at long distances. You don't need to get very close. You can calmly fire from a covered position and then retreat. Do you see the genius? Ukraine took the biggest weakness of the Challenger, being heavy, slow, with scarce ammunition, and turned it into a strength. Because to stay in a covered position and shoot from a distance, being heavy doesn't matter. Being slow doesn't matter. What matters is accuracy. And in that, the Challenger is unbeatable. But, let's be honest, this brilliant solution comes at a high price. Remember when I said the ammunition hasn't been made in 20 years? That's not an exaggeration. The United Kingdom stopped producing 120mm rifled ammunition decades ago. Supplies are limited, so every shot matters. Literally. And the cannons aren't manufactured anymore either. And what's worse, the rifled cannon wears out quickly, lasting about 500 shots at maximum power. Compare that to an American smoothbore cannon, 1,500 shots. That's 3 times less. And, besides that, there are no replacements. If a cannon breaks down completely, there isn't another one. Unless they take one from one of the retired tanks in the United Kingdom. But then the question remains, do any of those still have a cannon in good condition? As you can imagine, the impact of this is devastating. 1 year after delivery, only 7 out of the 14 Challengers were operational. Of the 7 that weren't working, only 1 had been seriously damaged in combat. 1 was set aside for training, and the other 5, sitting idle, waiting for parts. There simply weren't enough mechanics or components to fix them. They were probably cannibalizing some tanks to keep others running. That's the logistical nightmare I mentioned. The United Kingdom recognized this problem and, in February 2025, extended a contract with the company Babcock International. The goal is, of course, to train Ukrainian mechanics to do their own field repairs, as well as to ensure the supply of spare parts. Basically, to try to keep those 14 tanks alive for as long as possible. And here is the deeper lesson from this whole story. The lesson learned by the United Kingdom. Now, they are building the successor to the Challenger Two. It's called Challenger 3. And do you know what the most important change is? They are removing the rifled cannon and will install a German smoothbore cannon, the same one used in the most modern Leopard 2 tanks. And the reason is simple. The experience in Ukraine proved something fundamental to them. In long wars, logistics matter more than individual technical superiority. It's no use having the most accurate tank in the world if you can't keep it running. Even the best weapon is useless without ammunition. But here's what's fascinating. Challenger 3 will only incorporate these lessons because Challenger 2 taught them first. It taught them by fighting in Ukraine in real combat. The sacrifice of those 14 tanks was not in vain. They proved their worth on 2 completely different levels. On the political level, they unlocked hundreds of other tanks, saving Ukrainian lives by massively strengthening their armored forces. On the tactical level, they showed that even obsolete weapons can be reinvented, that limitations can become advantages with creative thinking, that sometimes the solution isn't to use something the way it was designed, but to completely reimagine its purpose. Remember when I mentioned that indestructible reputation? Well, it was really put to the test. Multiple Challengers were hit. Some were completely destroyed by Lancet drones, by Cornet missiles, by helicopter attacks. The invincibility is gone. But do you know what stayed? The crew's survival rate. In almost every documented case where a Challenger was hit, The crew survived and managed to evacuate. That's British design at work. They sacrificed speed and mobility to prioritize one thing above all: keeping the crew alive. They do this by storing the ammunition in separate armored compartments. Additionally, their blowout panels direct the force outward, not inward where the crew is. Now, with Soviet tanks, the ammunition is stored with the crew. When hit, the turret flies off along with everyone inside. They are completely opposite philosophies, and the Ukrainian one is proving that the British one works. Of course, those 14 tanks didn't completely change the war, but they managed to change the politics, unlocked massive resources, and then showed that innovation matters, that adapting matters, that reinventing matters. Ukraine didn't just use a British tank. They proved that, on the modern battlefield, creativity and adaptation are worth more than sheer numbers. They took a 20th century weapon and turned it into something that works in the 21st century. Even the United Kingdom was impressed, because they hadn't even imagined that their tank could be used like that. And that's the true genius of the Ukrainian strategy. And you? What did you find most impressive in this story? The political move by the United Kingdom, or the way Ukraine reinvented the use of the tank? Leave it in the comments. If you liked the video, share it and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.